Typhlosion has always lived in the shadow of its fellow Fire-type starter Pokemon. Charizard is obviously the most iconic and famous, and in competitive, it has a pretty good resume too. Charizard is great in the Gen 3 metagame, and it received 2 Mega Forms in Gen 6 that were both very competitively viable. Other Fire-type starters, such as Blaziken and Infernape, have had their times in the sun too, and more recently, Cinderace and Skeledirge have been very successful. These are all Pokemon with distinct qualities and advantages that help them to stand out and find these roles for themselves. But Typhlosion has always felt quite plain compared to its Fire-type friends. It's clear that not as much care went into making Typhlosion stand out. Typhlosion is just a simple mono Fire-type Pokemon, and it actually has the exact same stat distribution as Charizard. They literally just copy and pasted it. It has a very similar set of moveset options too. While its visual design is great and iconic, it isn't particularly unique in any other ways. This unfortunate Pokemon has never had much success in competitive, and over time, it has only drifted further into obscurity. Even Typhlosion's new Hisuian form in Pokemon Legends Arceus dropped the ball. A fire ghost typing could have been interesting, but giving it the ability Frisk, which is extremely unexciting and largely useless, felt like a bit of a slap in the face on a Pokemon that was already known for its plainness. Hisuian Typhlosion finds itself completely outclassed by other fire ghost type Pokemon, such as Skeledirge and Ceruledge. But what has Typhlosion's career actually been like? Has it ever found a place for itself? Are the few unique qualities it does have useful in any context? Let's explore the story of Typhlosion, a starter Pokemon that is often forgotten. Subscribe to the channel so that we may allow Typhlosion safe passage into the capital. He has important business there. Thank you. Having the exact same stats as Charizard with a largely inferior typing is pretty rough. Fire Flying is a great type combination. Thanks to Flying typing, Charizard is immune to ground type attacks, which is fantastic, and immune to spikes as well. But there are some situations where a simple Fire typing is more desirable, and in Typhlosion's debut game of Generation 2, it does have some legitimate value over Charizard because of this. This is a metagame dominated by the powerful electric types Zapdos and Raikou. In just about any serious Gen 2 game, you will see one of, if not both, of these Pokemon. And Charizard is weak to electric. Being weak to electric in this metagame is a serious detriment. Typhlosion, on the other hand, is not a flying type, so it is neutral to electric. It's not much of a difference, and it doesn't sound very exciting, but in this metagame so dominated by electric types, it is a big deal for Typhlosion to not die instantly to Zapdos or Raikou. Because of this, Typhlosion is a little bit more effective than Charizard as a mixed attacking threat. Typhlosion has a pretty good set of offensive tools. Most of these are identical to the tools of Charizard, but they do the trick. And being less threatened by the electrics means you are a little bit more consistent in this role. Typhlosion can use Sunny Day and Fire Blast to even act as a bit of a wall breaker. And Typhlosion does have at least one nice coverage option unavailable to Charizard, Thunder Punch, which is pretty useful coverage. Typhlosion can also use Dynamic Punch, an inconsistent move with only 50 accuracy, but it does give you some way to threaten Snorlax and Tyranitar, which are otherwise poor matchups for you. Earthquake is quite nice as well, as it can hit Gengar, Nidoking, and other members of the metagame. Being neutral to electric comes in handy against Gengar too, as Charizard is much more threatened by Gengar's Thunderbolt. So Typhlosion does stand out from Charizard in its debut generation, but not by much. This is probably the peak of Typhlosion's competitive relevance, and it isn't even particularly great. Typhlosion may have a better Zapdos matchup than Charizard does, but the Zapdos matchup is still probably unfavored overall. Zapdos Thunder can easily 2-hit KO you, and your Fire Blast is inaccurate and not even particularly threatening to them. You won't immediately lose, but you will probably still lose the 1v1 anyway. In Generation 3, Typhlosion's neutrality to electric moves is still somewhat of an advantage. Zapdos is still ever present here. Raikou is less common, but Jolteon is now a force to be reckoned with. And of course there's Gengar. The fact that Typhlosion is not only immune to Gengar's Will-O-Wisp, but neutral to its Thunderbolt does make Typhlosion a bit better than Charizard against Gengar in some situations. But at the same time, Typhlosion has way more competition in the role of Fire type. Typhlosion is stuck with the ability Blaze, which does have its useful applications, but other Fire types got more exciting abilities, like Houndoom, who got got Flash Fire, which grants an immunity to fire-type attacks. Houndoom's Dark Fire-type combination is also a little bit more exciting. It is even better against Gengar than Typhlosion is because it can trap Gengar with Pursuit. Even Arcanine is a bit more useful than Typhlosion because of its new abilities, Intimidate, and also Flash Fire. Your weaknesses compared to Charizard are also more pronounced, with Dugtrio existing, who can trap and eliminate you, ground weakness generally being more of a problem here, and vulnerability to spikes becoming more of a problem. Typhlosion does have the benefit of a pretty good speed stat compared to other fire types. Charizard, of course, has the exact same speed stat, but Typhlosion is not weak to electric, which might make it useful sometimes. The excellent player Super Epic Ampharos was recently brave enough to try out Typhlosion in a tournament game, and unfortunately, it was not very successful. It took until Generation 6 for Typhlosion to get a new distinct trait. They gave Typhlosion a good ability, finally. Flash Fire, the same ability that Typhlosion wishes it had back in Gen 3. This was actually enough for Typhlosion to finally overtake Charizard as the superior fire-type starter Pokemon. Typhlosion is ranked RU in Gen 6, while Charizard is all the way down in NU. Charizard, of course, got some cool new Mega Forms, but in terms of base forms, Typhlosion is better for what that's worth. Charizard suffered significantly from the addition of Stealth Rock in Generation 4, which deals a whopping 50% damage to Charizard as it switches in. Typhlosion only takes 25% from Stealth Rock, making it a little bit easier to use. Typhlosion also gained the move Eruption in Generation 4, a pretty fantastic attacking option that Charizard does not have. Eruption deals damage based on your HP percentage, dealing maximum damage when you're at full health, and it can have up to 150 base power, which is extremely hard hitting. With a Choice Scarf to boost your speed and even the occasional Flash Fire boost, this can be very threatening. While some effort was put in to make Typhlosion a bit more distinct in the later generations, most would agree that it was a bit too late, and even with these changes, Typhlosion still struggles to keep up with most other fire types available in the game. Many old Pokemon have been revamped in Generations 8 and 9 with new abilities or significant moveset options, maybe a new Convergent form or a Paradox form. The Gen 4 starters all received pretty noteworthy buffs, but Typhlosion has received little. Hisuian Typhlosion does not even feel that different. The new ability Frisk is far worse than Flash Fire. Frisk will simply reveal the enemy's held item on switch in. This isn't completely useless, but it is a bit unexciting. The new signature move Infernal Parade is interesting, a 60 power ghost type attack combining 30% burn chance and the Hex effect, dealing bonus damage to status foes. But this isn't even a great fit on the Pokemon. This would work well on something bulky, but Typhlosion is fast and aggressive. Many of its popular sets in the NU tier don't even use this move, opting for Shadow Ball instead just because it deals a bit more damage. The few times they have attempted to give Typhlosion some new tools, it's always something that another fire type can already do. When Typhlosion received Flash Fire, there were already many fire types with this ability that are still more desirable to use, and this fire ghost type Hisuian Typhlosion became available at a time when two other great fire ghost types saw their debut and are far better. Typhlosion's career in competitive Pokemon is unfortunate. One of the most visually iconic and recognizable fire types in the series was never really given a chance to stand out. My hope for future games is that they throw Typhlosion a bone and allow this forgotten fire type starter to rise from the ashes.